Hi, Raul. Welcome to Taekwondo Passion. It's a pleasure. Thanks for being here with us.
It's a tremendous pleasure for me to spend time with you and having a chat.
Excellent, Raul. Well, for the people who doesn't know you, who is Raul Landeo?
Well, no one special really. I would describe myself as mainly being a lecturer in biomechanics in the Australian Catholic University in the School of Behavioral Science, formerly known as Exercise Science. And I also do a bit of research in Taekwondo and have worked with the um, Australian Institute of Sport between 2013 or a bit earlier until 2017 as an advisor in Taekwondo, time in which we have developed emerging athlete program, but I guess we will talk about that in a bit. I hold strange links with some researchers in Spain, in Brazil, in Chile. Coral Falcó, she's a researcher from Spain. She works in Norway. She's a lecturer there. I also have contacts with Tomas Herrera, who is a physiologist in Chile. He was an athlete in his time. Have some links with Jesus Ramal, the coach of the Hankook Club, a very successful club in Taekwondo, and have links with other research organizations in Taekwondo, the International Association of Taekwondo Research, of which I am the Oceania rep. And essentially, that's what I do. Is live around Taekwondo, do research, teach at university, and have a happy life.
Great. That's the better part. How do you started to how do you started to relate to Taekwondo? How you started in Taekwondo?
It was by, I wouldn't say by chance, but I have a brother. He loves Taekwondo and he still is coaching Taekwondo. And it's because of him that I ended up doing Taekwondo. I wasn't interested naturally because I'm not flexible and I'm quite stiff, by the way. So it was really hard for me to actually train with him at home because I needed to stretch and I didn't like that part of it. But it wasn't until it wasn't until I saw him competing that actually developed the passion for it. He was a very clever fighter, and I liked the way he fought and got inspired from him. And because of that, I just joined mainly with the aim of competing because I
How
thought that was fun.
how old were you?
I was old for actual standards. I was 19 back then. I was doing mechanical engineering at university, and I joined the club. The club he used to go to, Black Belt, and then he opened up a club at university and joined the university club too, which happens to be just across the road from where I lived in Lima. So I was a late starter.
Okay. But you at first you didn't like all the flexibility part, but you
Mhm.
were like more like a fighter.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was a fighter. I like the fighting, but I'm not sure if I was a fighter. Um, if I'm honest, I would say I was quick. I was
Okay.
strong. I think I still am, but I wasn't flexible at all, and still I'm not. So hasn't gotten
Great.
better.
And your first contact with Taekwondo was in your house, training with your brother,
Yes.
or in the
Yep.
club? Okay, in your
That was
house.
at house. Yep.
Do you
That's when.
remember any special moment like going to a first competition or any certain point where you said, I love this thing and I will train from now?
Yes. Well, the first competition I went, it was a national competition. I went because my instructor said that I should, but I wasn't planning on it. And back then we didn't really consider weight, so I just fought in a heavyweight division. Um, the person I fought was really tall and good, and but despite that, I have no memory of the fight, to be honest, except that I found myself doing a jumping turning kick. I don't know how, and it was that rush that actually inspired me to keep looking for more of it. So I wouldn't class myself as a great athlete because if you look in the scheme of things, yeah, back then we were just lovers of Taekwondo, but we didn't think of ourselves as being athletes or anything special. It's just something you do because you like it, and that's probably the thing that nowadays is lost a bit with so many programs and specialized training. Sometimes you find athletes that are training for a long time, but because that's what they do, not necessarily because they actually enjoy. They don't get the thrill in every session as we used to. Um, for instance, to give an example of what I'm trying to say, sometimes before going to training with my brother, we will go and watch a movie, a kung fu movie or a martial arts movie to get us hyped, and then go straight to training, and we will enjoy that in that way. And after training, we will run back home 5 kilometers from the training venue to where we lived just because we liked it. Um, and I seen some athletes that as I said before, they do what they do just because it is what they do, not necessarily because in each session they actually find that thrill. And that's probably why I don't think we were athletes. We were just people that like the sport and play with it really.
Okay, but in that maybe empirical way, I guess you learn some things about training.
Yes, yeah, of course. We do in general, not just me or humans. We accrue experiences, and it is from those experiences that we actually feed the people that we have the chance to teach or to help achieving goals. But that applies to everything. I mean, hunting, building houses, or fixing shoes, or whatever it is the experiences that actually build up a body of knowledge that is shared with others. And that's what you say is correct, and that it will continue to be the case. I mean, we all accumulate a body of knowledge that is later on shared with the people that come after that in all aspects of life, I think.
Do you think that for that experience was also important that Taekwondo was like a new thing, something maybe exotic that you only seen in you only see in that time martial arts in movies, and you were like pioneers going into a new path?
Maybe yes. Well, back then, when we started, it was only karate in Peru, and the closest thing to it was boxing, which back then was quite popular. So one of the things that my brother used to do was and some boxing coaches used to do back then, and this is something I don't see happening anymore, is that a coaching box will take the boxers out on the streets with a pair of gloves and an extra pair of gloves for people who might want to fight their athletes, okay, to give it a go, and people will do that. And my brother used to look to do that quite a lot, and he gained a lot of experience from doing that. And I suspect that in a way was an empirical way of losing the fear of failure. You just compete, fight, and you get used to it. And that's something that probably helped him a lot, because when he competed, he actually played during competition and tried new things. He might come to me and say, "Oh, in this round, I will try this kick," and he will give it a shot, and sometimes work out for him. And they will say, "Oh, this time I will do this," and do that. So I guess you will be able to do that when you are free from the pressures of having to win, or when you don't care about losing. And I guess fighting with these boxers might have given him that training of not caring about the outcome, just enjoy what you're doing. Maybe I'm just speculating here.
Excellent. In Peru exists a kind of tradition in a little town, right? Of fighting in
Ah,
Christmas
yes,
or something like that.
yes. It is. It's an Incan tradition. That's from the Inca times. It's a Quechua tradition by which people sort their issues in a fight, and the fight doesn't always go to the end of it. They just spot who is superior, and they just stop the fight, and the person who loses accepts the outcome, and the whatever grievances they might be having is sorted then and they move on. When I showed this clip to some of my friends here, they were in Hara, but then I thought, well, this is better than going to war and no one gets hurt. It's just a simple way of sorting an issue. There is no resentment. After that is done, and people move on and nothing builds up. So the pressure doesn't build up in the society. It's just released by these outlets. And I think that's a, I wouldn't say a good or a bad. It's just a way of dealing with conflict, with social conflict, and that doesn't escalate into other forms of presentations, which probably we see in other societies. Again, I'm not trying to indicate superiority, but just this is just one of the many ways humans have found to deal with issues. And that, yeah, it's still going on. It's becoming more popular now because of the social media and the fact that things can be recorded and shared. But it has been a long held tradition, it still is, and I suspect it will continue to be the case in the years to come.
Excellent. I never thought of it as a way of release pressure, but I agree.
Yep.
Okay. And how do you become a national Peru team member and later national team trainer?
There are two different things. Back in the days, to make up a team, you just win a selection competition, and that's pretty much what it was. Back then, we did not have a regular training session for a national team. It was really going from a club to an international competition. So club training, international competition, really. So that was very rough conditions. But again, back in the day, sometimes you make up a team and there is no competition because there is no funds and no one goes. Or sometimes you make up a team and a couple of artists will end up going and not the whole team. And sometimes you're just left at the airport. So it's really a completely different scenario to what it is today, even in Peru. And now is they do have a stable national team and they do have a regular training with some Cuban coaches and whatnot. But it's a more organized setting. So that was some. I did make national team, but I think it was just winning the nationals and that was it. So there is not much more to it. In how I became a national coach, it was a process. I had a club. Well, I inherited a club from my brother, a very small club. We had, I think, 12 students, senior. And the news that we were organizing the Pan American Championship in 1988 came, and I was on halfway between being an athlete and a coach, a club coach. So I started to get ready for the selections for that competition, but then I was also preparing my students who were athletes too for that comp. And then I realized that I couldn't do both. I either train for myself under someone or focus on my athletes. And then I thought arithmetics, if I win, there is only one chance of doing something. But if my athletes make the team, there is 3 or 4 chances of doing something. So I went for it. So I stopped my career and then focused on my athletes, and 3 of them made the national team, and one of them won the gold medal at the competition. So I was happy for that, and I thought I made the right decision. So that's how I started to be a coach. And a couple of years later, after that, I was appointed as a coach for the national team. We had 3 coaches: my brother, another master, and myself. We prepared the team for the South American Games, which we won, and we have a streak of 3 or 4 years doing well until I came to Australia. They continued the work, and after that, I lost track with the work they were doing.
Great. By the things you are telling me, you were doing great in the national team. And why did you move to Australia?
That's the turns of life. I was actually enjoying the work I was doing in Lima. So we were, for the first time, having a stable team. with regular training venues. I got inspired by a presentation that Ireno Fargas, the Spanish coach, and a scientist from the CAR, the Center for High Performance in Barcelona. There was a course that was organized for the Pan American coaches in Puerto Rico. So I attended the course with my brother because he was a coach too. And I got inspiration from the presentation by Ireno Fargas and by this scientist, Manuel. Unfortunately, I forgot his name. So when I came back, I actually thought that that was the way to progress, to look at science and to understand the physiological processes behind training, the need for planning the training, the need for improving biomechanics. And that's how I ended up where I am really. So I got inspiration from them and tried to do as best as I can to implement that. I learned to study a lot. I started to study a lot. And that's how I think we did well back in the 90s, 91, 92. We had some successes at the Pan American Games in Havana, which I would say was also a catalyst for me, seeing what the Cubans were doing and how they improved from back in 1988, 3 years late prior to it, having gone to the Pan American Championships in Lima with a team that came essentially from karate. They weren't Taekwondo athletes, they were karate players, and I was talking to them. And from that, 3 years later, to having won Pan American medals, that was impressive. So I was taken aback by that and thought and confirmed the notion that, yeah, we need to study. If we want to do well, we need to learn, we need to know what we are doing. And that's some of that, I think, started to pay off for us in Peru in between the 90s, 94, even until 98, where some of the team members were winning Pan American Championship medals. So it was a good period. But after that, I don't know essentially what happened. I disconnected. As in any other federation, there is also a level of changes and groups that change. So I really lost track of that. Yeah, but we did have a good time between 90 and 94. So I was enjoying life. And going back to your question, yeah, back then my now wife, but then my girlfriend, had the chance to come to Australia because she had her auntie living here. So she discussed that with me and said, oh, my auntie said, if I want to go to Australia, and I said to her, because I saw she wanted, I said, oh, just go and I will go after you. And that's how I ended up here. So the things you do for love.
That was a love thing. Great.
Yes, yeah.
You by that time you have finished your career.
Yes, I came here, and in Australia, what I did a postgraduate studies in biomechanics in the University of Queensland. And in that, I won a scholarship to do my PhD, which I completed, and that's how I ended up in the academic setting, but always linked to Taekwondo because that's really what I like and what I think I understand a bit.
As soon as you started living in Australia, you started to look for Taekwondo there.
Yes, well, we arrived to the Gold Coast, which is like saying Cancun or something that is touristic essentially, a beautiful town, but it's for tourists. So there were some clubs in Taekwondo. We went to training, but being new migrants, we needed to work, and we work in anything we could. And so that took priority to settle and establish ourselves in the Gold Coast, and then we moved up to Brisbane because of my studies. My wife got a job there as an engineer, and then I opened up a small club there. It went good, but then we moved to Sydney for my wife to pursue a new job opportunity and for me to pursue my PhD. So, and then in Sydney, we tried to open a few clubs, but the way clubs are run here is very different to the way I was used to with clubs being run in Peru. I don't know whether it is the case now, but back then, I used to be a coach in a number of clubs, and there will be a club owner, and he will pay you a percentage of what each student paid them, say 60-60 or 50-50, whatever that might be the arrangement. So my my job was to essentially go to the club, coach, have fun, and leave. The club owner will be looking after the recruiting, the payments, everything else. So I just coached, and I was used to it. So when I came here, I found out that I needed to run everything from extending the hand to pick up the money and things that I wasn't comfortable with. To be honest, I'm not a business person. So
So,
it went okay in Sydney. Had a few groups, but because I'm not a business person, things didn't weren't able to sustain themselves. So yeah, so I had to stop because I found myself that I there was a point in which I was driving my athletes from their house to the club and then driving them back. There was a lady getting the money, paying the whole, and I was getting nothing. So I thought this probably is not for me. So I stopped that.
how long did take to you realize that maybe that business part was not for you?
I knew it from the onset, to be honest, but I needed to give it a try for me to know that I wasn't good at it. So I confirmed it twice because I had opened a club. It failed that way, and then tried again with a different club and failed that again in that way. So I stopped that. So,
Great. And from that time to now, I guess you've been in Peru many times as a
yep.
visiting. How do you see the differences in Taekwondo development in both countries?
Australia in Peru, you mean?
In Peru, yeah.
Yes. In Australia, there are a number of successful clubs that do not do competition. They understand that running a club and running competitions is expensive. They need to travel here and there, carry athletes with them, looking for accommodation, the issues of looking after them, security, and all that. So a number of clubs do the martial arts and they do well, both from what they do and from what the business side of things. So because they don't have to worry about that, and they don't have parents wanting their kids to be the next Olympian champion. And that also plays in some kids' heads because if you don't have what it takes, it's not enough to be wanting it, or it's not the idea of wanting is not enough. So there are, I would say, a good chunk of the clubs do martial arts, um, and that's probably the difference in Peru. From what I have observed, most of the clubs in Peru they do try to do competition. There is no successful clubs doing martial arts for the sake of the martial arts. Organizationally, I do not know how Peru is organized, but I have the feeling that it's a bit more advanced than in Australia in that they have um, different tiers of organizations from a smaller state to bigger and national. In Australia, we only have the national body and the states organization. And because of the size of the country and because of the dispersion of the population, I believe it will be really hard to have something that is that goes trickles down and be meaningful. That is in Perth, for instance, there is some clubs in the city of Perth, and then the next club is 300 kilometers away in a small town, and it's really hard to have something organized with those distances and with the amount of students that they have. So in that sense is different because they have the national body and the state body, and that, as far as I understand, that's what it is. And the sports side of things is what dominates the state's organization. But I feel that there is a realization that there has to be a different body looking at after the sports side, which is the Australian Institute of Sport, which, from what I understand, is moving into that direction to take the competition part of the taekwondo onto their hands, working on a pathway from athlete development on that side of things and leave the martial arts and the organization to the national body, which I think is a good thing. They are splitting based on reality. And that's the reality in Taekwondo. We have the sports part, which takes a different path to what the martial arts is. And I believe they should be run differently.
Okay, excellent. At the start of the interview, you mentioned some science partners that you have
Yes.
of research. Can you tell me what are the research topics now that you know in Taekwondo in the world?
Yes, there are a number of lines. There is a group that works on the pedagogical aspects of Taekwondo, which is led by um, I forgot I cannot really pronounce his surname. He's an Argentinian scientist who works in the pedagogy. He's a really good guy. I have met him casually in one of the conferences in Korea. We didn't talk too much, but I knew he presented his work, and he is focused on the pedagogical aspects of Taekwondo, and he is doing a good job. And I understand he leads a group, or he comes from a club in which that is highly valued. Um, so that's one line that I'm aware of. In Chile, we have Tomas Herrera. He's working on the physiological aspects of Taekwondo, and he connects really well with Francini, which is a scientist in Brazil, and they are doing a fantastic job in assessing the physiological necessities or the physiological aspects of combat in Taekwondo, but not only in Taekwondo, but also in other combat sports. And I think that part of research is quite fundamental at this stage, simply because Taekwondo is changing the rules. They are trying to encourage more competition. Therefore, the physiological needs of Taekwondo athletes are changing. So we need to provide training that will support that transition from having to have someone is waiting for the chance to kick to have someone that is always active during the fight. So they are clearly distinct physiological needs for it, and that has to be understood properly in order to provide the adequate training for that to be sustained. And from what I have read, Thomas's work, he's working on that side of things, and I think that's quite exciting to understand. Coral Falco with Cristina Menescarli, and they are from Spain. There's Isaac Esteban. He used to be a national team member for Spain, an excellent athlete, by the way. They are working on the performance analysis side of Taekwondo, that is how often a kick is done, what type of kicks is done, and I believe that also is quite exciting, and I see a future for that type of work to be implemented. And on my end, I work on the biomechanics aspects of Taekwondo, that is force production, the movement patterns, and when something is efficient, what kind of training should we do to facilitate the development of particular attribute in Taekwondo. So that's for the conference. From the conference that I have attended, there is work on injury surveillance done by a guy in Canada. I have really bad memory with names. Apologies to those whose name I forget. And work done in Korea as well for biomechanists too, and also in the part of injury treatment and prevention. So there is a scope of things. I think still a bit in its infancy. I think the growth will come when all these pieces of knowledge get integrated into something that can be translated to the coach, because has, in my view, science that is stored into a journal, that is stored into a PDF file, onto a bookcase, has no value unless it is used. And we do research for the coaches, not for other researchers. So I think we need to bridge that gap to bring the knowledge we have not to another scientist, but to a coach that will use. And that's what I think we are still missing, that link. That link was there was an attempt in a training camp in Spain that I was invited to bridge that gap. Was organized by the Valencia group, led by keep forgetting the names. I'm sorry. And I even have them as friends, led by a group of coaches in Valencia, and there was a combination of workshops. Octavio is a psychologist, did a magnificent presentation on the psychology of training. I did a bit of biomechanics presentation, and there were training too. So that's what we need to do more of. That is integrate that piece of knowledge to the coach. I think that's what we are missing.
Excellent. And about your research, can you tell us about it? And Now that you mentioned that part of translating into the coach, if you can help us a little about how your research can help the coaches.
Yes, I before the interview, I was talking to you about a group with whom I work and train in my lab. For instance, that's to me that's my lab really because we do train when we can. We obtain training measurements in ground reaction force, velocity, or jumping ability, or whatnot, and modify the training based on that information. Someone that does that job really good is Jesus Ramal, the Spanish coach. He actually does that in his own way, and he uses that scientific information he obtains and implements that back into his training because the scientific information has to inform what you do in training. So in my particular case, as I said to you, I obtain measurements during training and use that information to modify the training that I'm doing for the next session or the next microcycle and whatnot. So at this point in time, my attention is really in the interaction between the person and the floor. So in order to kick, we need to push against the floor for the kick to take off and be landed. So when we move, when we do a displacement, when we do a piece of footwork prior to a kicking or after a kicking, we need to interact with the ground. And my focus at this point in time is to actually understand how can we improve that human to ground interaction in order to improve the kicking ability of that person. However, that will only go so far because Taekwondo is an event that can be won by using a multitude of attributes and each of them in a different fashion between people to people. That is, there might be a person that um, relies more on his or her strength to kick and therefore score. There might be a person that relies more on his ability to identify when is the right time of kicking and actually do the kick then. There might be a person that relies more on his technical traits and use of distance, use of rhythm. So there is a number of ways in which you can be successful in Taekwondo. It's not like sprinting or weightlifting. So in a sprint wins whoever gets to the end first. In Taekwondo, not necessarily. You might be fast, you might be flexible, but if you don't have the tactical ability, then you won't do anything. And the opposite, you might not be flexible, you might not be fast, but if you have the tactical ability, you might do something meaningful. So that's the difficulty in Taekwondo in understanding how each of the many factors interplay and how can we maximize the combination of those factors to the benefit of the athlete we are working with. And to add more complexity to this, you can win one fight against someone in one way, but when you fight someone else, you need to change that equation entirely and present a new one. So it's not in Taekwondo research will provide lots of information which is good and needed, but it's at the end of the day how the athlete will put that together at the time of fighting against a particular opponent that will and does make the difference. And that's something we need to keep in mind. That's where a good coach that is able to juggle all these pieces of information can actually make a difference. And that's where I think, so really all the science is here to serve the coach. And that's the point I was trying to make earlier. So we need to pass it into the coach, otherwise it's useless.
Great. And I remember back some time ago when I interviewed you before about the work that you were doing about the stiffness,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned also certain pieces of information from the work that you are doing with those athletes now. What a little advice or something that you can give us, or some line that you might think it's worth now training.
Yes, yes. Advice number one: um, watch out or pay attention to the time you you spend in contact with the ground. That is in between a kicks. If you notice that you spend too much time, it's probably an indication that you are not have the stiffness enough, and then your kicking action will therefore be reduced in terms of speed and power. So pay attention to how long you spend on the ground. If you are doing footwork, you're doing translation, the same. So how long you spend on the ground, that will give you an indication of how well your conditioning is and how well your kicking action that comes after that is going to be. That is one. To minimize the number of contacts with the ground, of course, within the constraints that the tactical situation will require. I wouldn't like to say that this rule applies for all circumstances because we know it's not true. But in an ideal circumstance, minimize the contact time with the ground. So don't be sat or don't be still on the ground. If you are moving, try for those actions to be agile and quick. And that will mean that for that to be possible, the amount of flexion you get on your knees will be reduced, which by implication means that you have your muscles in a higher active state, which by implication means that you will be able to kick with more power and more speed. But again, all these recommendations are devoid of the tactical context in which things are to happen, and we need to keep that in mind. So I wouldn't like to give the impression that if we do this or that, we will be good. Not necessarily, because it does depend on the context in which the athlete is behaving. But during training, I believe it is important to be mindful of how we interact with the ground. And saying that, although it sounds generic, when you start paying attention to it, when you are on the mat, when you start paying attention to how you behave, you will generally start to modify the way you do that, you do things, and you will notice an improvement on your technique. And I think as an advice, although it sounds generic, if you implement it, it will work for sure. Another piece of advice I will give to athletes is watch your posture. Being an upright in a natural anatomical posture helps a lot in the quality of the subsequent kicking action. Sometimes when we tense up and we get into the fighting position, we tend to show some kyphosis on the back. What that does is anteriorly tilt your pelvis, which limits the range of motion of the hip at the time of kicking. But if you have a natural posture, your hips are free to move and you have more chances of getting greater reach in a kick than if you not. So that is a second piece of advice that I would give from the research I have done. And the third one, I know it's quite convenient. I know we sometimes get lazy. Do not wear shoes when you train. Although the shoe manufacturers might not be happy with this, but I would say do not wear shoes when you train. Train barefoot and try to spend as much time as you can barefoot. The reason is quite simple. Humans are born without shoes. The anatomy that we have, is equipping us with the capacity to live with no shoes. At some point, we invented them maybe to ambulate on environments that are harsh, but if it makes sense, wear no shoes. I'm not asking people to run on the road with no shoes because you're gonna get lacerations. That would be silly. But what I'm saying is if you can train without shoes, do it without shoes. The reason is quite simple. We have up to 70,000 receptors on the skin of the plant of the foot. Wearing shoes is removing that capacity of the receptors to detect the information that they are there to detect. And therefore, the way our muscles function, the way our whole neurological system work when we exercise is altered because we are depriving the feet from those receptors activity. It would account as us blinding ourselves and trying to run. We need to have that visual feedback because we have the eyes for that purpose. If we have that many receptors on the base of the foot, it's because they do have a function. We need to allow that to function that way. To give you an anecdotal information on that, there has been a study done on comparing the amount of ankle sprains in Western countries to ankle sprains in countries where the wearing shoes is not the norm. There have been studies comparing the incidence of flat feet in countries that wear shoes, and again comparing that to the incidence of flat feet in countries where wearing shoes is not the norm. In countries where wearing shoes is not the norm, the ankle sprains are almost inexistent, and a very, very low percentage of the population suffer flat feet, which is not the case in Western societies, because we are depriving the feet from that sensorial information that is fundamental to the activation of the muscles of the lower limb. So that's my piece of advice. Watch your interaction with the ground, keep a good posture, try not to wear shoes if you can.
Would you recommend try not to wear shoes or be barefoot over the maybe using the sole foot protector?
If you have to, if you're sparring, you need to protect your ankles or the top of your foot. Yes, you have to. You need to cost benefit. If sustaining an injury 2 weeks prior to competition, maybe too risky, maybe you just need to concede. So it's always a matter of cost and benefit,
Uh,
not to be
and
reckless either.
and the protector that you use for competition. I mean the
Yeah. For competition, on top of the foot, yes, you have to, but on the base of the foot for training, I would say keep it clean, keep it
keep
in.
it okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I would say that. So always need to compromise with things. But yeah, I'd say that because the amount of foot movement that occurs inside the shoe is tremendous, and sometimes we don't account for it. And sometimes injuries do occur for that because of that. And it is important to. I would even go as far as say I know of some Olympic athletes that do weight training without shoes because of the sensorial information that is required to do that. So it is important to at least keep that in the back of your head if you are going to train. So for instance, with the athletes that I work with, I always ask them to take the shoes off unless they have to, but if not, shoes off.
Excellent. And you are also doing a kind of research about the this trend that we were talking before the interview, the trend of like doing part private, part a
Oh, yes.
federation.
Yes, now we are collecting information in terms of how things are being organized to develop a pathway for athletes in Taekwondo, that is um, from a new beginner to how do they end up being Olympic champions, and how best to facilitate that pathway. And I'm at this stage collecting the information from a number of federations, compile that information and present a report which hasn't been completed yet because I'm still collecting information. But we mentioned that there is the tendency of some private organizations doing that job, and I saw the benefit of that. Um, Although I'm not a business person, I think some people has the capacity to do that, and they should. And we mentioned that, for instance, Ramos, the Spanish coach, has within his organization some Olympic, Pan American champions, Olympic athletes doing really well, and it is a private organization doing the management of that. We have Jesus Ramal, and I had a nice chat the other day, and he explained his philosophy on running his club and how he sees from beginners to the elite, and I thought that was fantastic, and there is potentially due to the short cycles that national federations have at the helm of their programs, there is also a limitation of changes in politics. How do we policies will change when the new president comes? They might bring a new coach, so cycles are broken all too often, and there is not the stability that is required to bring an athlete from beginners to through to fruition, which could take easily between 10 to 15 years, if not more. So it has to be a long process, and there has to be the continuity of a program should be ensured for there to be a meaningful result. Otherwise, we see processes being stopped halfway, and with that, you see athletes being lost to the system. But again, I'm just collecting the information and see what might happen. But don't be surprised in 10 to 15 years time, Taekwondo is managed like tennis, for instance, in which each athlete has their own coach, their own. Each athlete is its own entity, um, and probably that might be a good thing because it gives continuity to a process that might start. But we don't know how this thing will work. That's a pure speculation based on the trends that we see. Um, for instance, UK team is separated from the federation, and I don't know whether other countries might be adopting a model similar to it, given the fact that UK team is a very successful model. They are doing really well in a short amount of time. They just went from being a country competing to be a country that is prevalent in this scene. So I think leaders in Taekwondo should open up their minds and adopt more flexible, effective ways of conducting a program. But that's something else.
And as you see that trend, what trends do you see in in Taekwondo as a sport, and how do you imagine it that will be in 10 or 15 years?
It will be quite interesting, to be honest. I in one of the athletes that I work with in the group that I work in the morning, he was mentioning uh, AI, artificial intelligence, and I think I'm quite curious to know whether we can tap into that to predict trends. To the notion is that although there is in nature there is chaos, there is a high level of no organization, but what prevails is organization, if that makes sense. So you have a number of atoms. The ones that were able to organize themselves into a structure are the ones that become a thing, a molecule, and then become an object, and with millions of time becomes a living entity such as us. So it is organization what prevails. So when we look at a competition, although we might say, well, a fight is unpredictable, I don't think that is true because we, after all, are biological entities that respond to an order. We have a biological order within ourselves. We can breathe. If we are breathing, we will pass oxygen to the muscles and the muscles will function. It's not that the muscles function when they want. They do need some prerequisites for them to function, and so does the central nervous system. It is organizing our body. And we receive influences, and some of our actions are very predictable. Say, if there is a ball thrown at you, you are going to cover yourself. So that's predictable. You are not going to wait for the ball to hit you doing nothing. So there is a level of predictability in your actions. It is providing the stimulus that will bring about that response from you that to an extent can be predictable. So what I'm trying to say with all this blurb is that when two athletes get into a competition, their actions are predictable to the extent that they both are equipped with tools during training that in theory will equip them to avoid defeat and obtain success by scoring more points. So they both have the tools, and those tools are known. Then they are not going to invent a new kick in the competition. They will do what they have been trained. So they are predictable. So what we need to do is to develop an algorithm using perhaps artificial intelligence, collecting enough information from fights, situations, first fight, second fight, against this, against that, or against fighter B, C, or D, whatever. And we will start seeing, we potentially see a start trends emerging out of that. Will enable us to, by using artificial intelligence, to predict what would potentially happen if this athlete is placed under these circumstances. So the task of the coach will be then to bring about those circumstances that will hasten the athlete's performance or limit if that is your opponent. But we need to work on that. So that's one of the questions that I thought you were going to ask me is what is in the medium term, and that's what I think. What is exciting me about that is what is keeping me excited. The ability or the capacity or the potential to do something like that. There has been some work done by Coral Falco and her group in performance analysis, which essentially looks at what is done when, but we need to build more information to, sorry, we need to build that into an algorithm that will enable us to start to understand athletes' behavior in a competition. And eventually, I suspect it will be able to predict how things will happen, especially if we recognize now that the tactical and technical field in Taekwondo, even the body shape, the anthropometry, the body type, is determined really by the rules that are put in place for the competitions. Back in the days when I was young, you wouldn't see a 58-kilogram fighter being 180 to 185 tall. Now you wouldn't see a 170, 58 kilograms halter there because they have no chance. So the rules are determining even body types. So the rules are determining technical approaches. The rules are determining the tactical field. The rules are determining the physiological needs. So if we input the rules into this algorithm, we should be able to predict what would potentially happen. And that is really that I'm even sharing this with you before I actually worked on it, but that's what I will be working on in the next couple of years. See
Ah,
what
that
happens.
sounds amazing.
But let's see what happens.
Okay, so that way we can maybe the World Taekwondo, the organization can before make a rule change, predict how it
What
will
exactly?
behave.
What will be the outcome of that? Yes.
Okay, great. And like in a more personal view, how do you find the rule set right now? Do you is there something you don't like that you will change?
Yeah, if I could change many things, I would. But the reality, and I was having this conversation with some athletes, as to the superiority of the old or the new school. And unfortunately, under the new sets of rules, the new school is better because you would see athletes from the old school winning now, but they are not. So the the that's the test and that's the answer. Whether I like it or not, I particularly don't like it that much, to be honest, but I do recognize that it is the most effective way of fighting under these rules. That doesn't take away from the athleticism of these athletes because they are really athletic. They do train a lot. I have had the fortune of testing a number of these athletes in my lab, um, and they are super athletes, and there is no take credit out of them. It is the rules that are actually showing those attributes of them on competition. If they could have different set of rules, they'd probably be fighting differently. I don't know. But if I could change anything in the rules, I would probably split, as it is done in bodybuilding. Someone told me that, short and tall. So you might have a 58 kilogram under 170, 58 kilograms above 170, something like that for each weight division. Although I know that's not going to happen because being an Olympic sport, we need to limit the number of weight divisions because there will be too many medals for Taekwondo, which is not acceptable by the International Olympic Committee. But that will probably show different attributes. You probably see the 160, 170 fast, spectacular athlete 58 fighting and doing super fights, which we are deprived of now. And that's the only thing that I'm really missing.
It's an interesting idea because you cannot cut your legs, no, to
Yeah.
to make the height.
Yes.
Great. I saw that in the past you opened a Taekwondo academy recently,
Yes.
Advanced
Yes.
Taekwondo.
Yes.
How do you live that experience of after all this research, working with national teams, now share your experience with children?
Was probably the most lovely time that I have had after a while. I actually enjoyed that time. It's having the opportunity to interact with kids, with how bright they are, because kids naturally are bright and they are inquisitive, and just having the chance to actually make an input that early has been fantastic. For some reason, we started having mainly most of our kids were under the age of 6. Um, and we had kids above 6 too, which actually were really, really good. But it was a blast, I would say. And I say was because the club is closed now because of this COVID situation and all the regulations that the governments are imposing on businesses of this type. And I couldn't, I shouldn't say my wife and I couldn't feel comfortable forcing the kids to sanitize every so often and to keep a distance of 1.5 meters and stuff like that. That really goes against nature. It is natural for us for humans to interact and to inflict that on kids at that young age when they are forming the ability to form emotional relationships with others, not knowing what the impact of that will be when they are in the age of relating to trying to form a family. I just couldn't live with it, so I had to give that a stop. And let's see if things change, then that might come. But if things do not change, I couldn't live myself doing it to kids. No.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm dealing with that situation right now.
Yeah.
I have to close. Probably I will close because there are other schools that are open right now, but I
Hmm.
can't do that. It's training with a mask and
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah, it hurts as a human, as a parent, and as a human being. It hurts to see young kids going through that. And I don't want to be part of those inflicting that on kids. I understand that some organizations need to keep going, and I understand they need to embrace, but I have the luxury of not having to do it. uh, i have a I have other things that I do, and that club was just mainly for the pleasure of coaching. um, but in any case, what I realized, I think the spirit of your question was how is the transition from doing research and working with Olympic teams to do that, um, has been transformed. All that I have learned during the research period and all that I have learned working with athletes that go to the Olympics and identifying some of the things that could have done been better when they were kids and growing up, informed me as to what is fundamental, the fundamental tools in Taekwondo at a young age. So I focused on that. I did not try to teach them Pumse from the first class. I did not try to teach them Aremaki or Montomaki in the first weeks. I focused on what I thought and learned to be key for the later development in Taekwondo. So I focus on that. In that way, that experience of working at the elite level has been quite informing, informed quite a lot to what I did with these young kids. And in all honesty, I must say, the kids that I thought I was teaching Taekwondo, okay, were actually really good at doing the splits in short period of time, doing beautiful turning kicks, beautiful side kicks, beautiful spinning kicks. So I was really pleased to see that there is many ways in which Taekwondo can be approached, and that is why people like what's do you know him, the Argentinian guy working in
Aquilian, Fernando
yes,
Aquilian.
Fernando, apologies for not remembering your name. Fernando Aquilin, the work that he's doing is fantastic because really is targeting that level, and that's something we all should know well. And I cannot thank Fernando for the work he's doing because he's tapping where we all should start tapping to. And yeah, that's the experience that I have working with kids coming from the elite sport to that level. It makes me realize how important some basic things are.
And as a researcher, what do you think of this thing? Do you of the pandemic? Do you think we'll be back to open dojangs?
Uh, it hurts to contemplate that because my brother, he's passionate about Taekwondo. He has his club. He loves coaching Taekwondo for the sake of Taekwondo. He's not so much into trying to win medals. Um, and like him, there are many coaches that I know, and I include you in that do it because it is beautiful to do. And it hurts to think that if things are not going to go back to normal or what we consider to be normal, all that will be lost. And who is going to lose there is the kids that will be missing out of being taught by you and by other coaches in that form. I don't know whether things will. Um, you can see lots of conspiracy theories going around, but sometimes those conspiracy theories end up being true, and that's the sad thing of it. You can refer back to the Nazi time and how it was when the Nazis starting to work with the young people. They at that time, if you say to them, "Oh, this is going to happen," they will look at you. "Oh, where do you get that from?" For it to end up happening. So it's quite uncertain. History has taught us some tough lessons, and one of them is that we get lied a lot. Unfortunately, we got lied when they said that there were going to be weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and therefore we should invade them. And that was not true, and we knew that. The Tom Kim boat in Vietnam was a good lie for them to get into the Vietnam War. And if we review history, there will be lots of lies that have been told. And I'm not suggesting at all that this is the case, but I'm just saying that we don't know. And to be honest, I don't really know what's going to happen. I would like to think that we will be able to get to normal. That I would like to think that this virus will be under control soon, or that we all get it and we move on. I don't know, but I would like to think that things will get back to how. Not to say that the way things were good, because there were so many people suffering in the world already, but it's just quite uncertain, and I wouldn't like to see kids not doing taekwondo because of that, or kids being forced to wear masks to do something that is entirely human. I don't like that idea.
Okay. Well, let's move now to more happy topic.
Oh yes.
What do you enjoy of Australia, and what do you miss of Peru?
The Peru, I miss everything. To be honest, I miss my friends, my family. They are there. I miss the fact that I know exactly what is what and what is not, and that I know where to go, where not to go. It's not to say that Peru is. There is so many problems. Lima, where I lived, is a horrible city, but I love that city. It's my horrible city, I would say. So I miss that. I miss the streets full of books that I used to go and just browse through them, books after book, and then go to a small bar, have a beer, and then go home. I miss all those little things. I miss the cows. I like Australia. It's a beautiful, beautiful country, geographically speaking. It's beautiful, but I would say that is true for every country too. I mean, when I go to Peru, it is really having come coming here has opened my eye to the fact that we can find the beauty everywhere. When I went to Valencia, I was in love with Valencia. Even though what I saw was rice fields, I enjoy that. I enjoy the city, beautiful castles. And when I come to Australia, I see where I live. There is a bush next to us, and I every morning look at the sun rising. It's beautiful. But when I went to Peru, I did the same. I saw the beauty of Cusco, many other places. And when I went to Mexico to the center, San Luis de Potosí, went to Allende. What's the name of the town?
San Miguel de Allende.
San Miguel de Allende. Beautiful places. To be honest, it's a beautiful city, beautiful place. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I do love Australia. I do like it a lot, but so I do like any other point on this planet, because this planet is beautiful too.
Great. And the life there, how
The
is it?
life
How it is?
it's a bit lonelier than the one I used to have in Peru. It's like from home to work and work to home, and you seldomly interact with friends. I have a couple of three good friends, and I see them every 4 months or something like that. So it's not that I see them often. So I miss that. But at the same time, it gives you tranquility. It reminds me my hometown, where you can leave your push bike on the street, and when you come back 2 hours after, it will be there. So that's great of being here. When my kids go out and to the park, I know they are safe and nothing's going to happen to them. So that's a great thing. I couldn't do that back home. So those things are different, beautiful for different reasons, and one must appreciate each of them for what they are. And Yeah, I do like Australia for many aspects. I can go to the beach and beautiful beaches. I haven't seen as beautiful as the ones here. But probably if I go and spend more time in Havana, I will find beautiful beaches too. So it's and probably same in Mexico. So I think the world is beautiful.
Great. Uh, is there any middle term project that you have that you can tell us about, or could be Taekwondo related or not?
Yeah, well, that's what I was mentioning to you. The use of AI is one. That's a middle term project that I have, and I also want to somehow. I don't know yet. I have started, but still don't know what the outcome will be. I would like to form a center for research in Taekwondo and Taekwondo education, um, but scientifically based. In Taekwondo, I'm discussing this with my university, and if that doesn't go through, maybe with the Australian Association. If that doesn't go through, maybe as a private enterprise. I don't know, but that's what I would like to see happening. A center that provides coaching education of the highest quality, scientifically based, and that's what you will probably hear about that in a couple of years. I don't know. Let's see
Excellent.
what's happening. So I have those two things in mind: the AI and this
Great.
the education.
Great. Let's move now to the last questions of the
Yes.
interview, more in the human development
Yeah.
way. Is there a book that you've given most as a gift, and why? And if there's not a book that you gifted, 1 to 3 books that have more impact your life.
Okay. I have given books as a gift, and that's my preferred, my favorite gifts to give. Especially, I work at the university. I have students that are in the age of 19 to 21 when they graduate, and we taekwondo athletes that are young too. So basically, the book that I give to the ones I form a friendship with is the 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I have been doing that for many years. So I have probably a top seller for that book for Gabriel because I have given lots of them, and I do that to kids that I think will appreciate and value that I know that will sit and read and enjoy the read, and so that's something but good books that have impacted me that would be one. The one that I remember a lot um, is by Julio Cortázar, the La Flor Amarilla in Spanish, the Yellow Flower in English. Julio Cortázar, Tales of Julio Ramón Ribeiro. It's a Peruvian writer, and I would strongly encourage you to have a read to that Cuentos de Julio Ramón Ribeiro. That's a magnificent book. And 100, no, um, Así se templó el acero. It's a Russian book from the Soviet time. It's a beautiful book.
What's the
I
name of
can't.
the book again?
Así se templó el acero in Spanish,
Así se
and
templó el acero.
in English is how the metal was forged. It's a beautiful book, and I'm trying to find a copy of that to give it to my daughters because I think they will enjoy the read because it has a historical component because it is during the Russian Revolution. It's about a teenager growing up in that period and how he falls in love with a girl in that context. And it's quite a beautiful written book, and I actually um, enjoy that. And a book that actually hit me hard was Por quién doblan las campanas de Ernest Hemingway. Uh, it brought me to tears towards the end. It was a beautiful book, powerful, and I think young people should read that too.
Why do you prefer to give us a gift more Gabriel Garcia Marquez than, for example, Vargas Llosa, that is your country
Countryman, yes,
country?
simply because I think Gabriel Garcia Marquez encapsulates in his writing the magic, the craziness, and the fantasy that is common to all Latin Americans, including you. So it has that element of fantasy, craziness, magic, those sense of humor that is translated into that book that it actually depicts us quite a lot and quite well. Vargas Llosa is a magnificent writer. He's a very technical, but I don't think he touches on that element that describes us in one pincelazo. I would say when one stroke of a brush, we all are painted by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and Vargas Llosa is a good one, but doesn't. I don't think does that job, and I don't think it's his interest either.
Do you think it's maybe a better way of introducing Latin America to an Australian, for example?
Yes, I think so. I think so, and I give that book to the people that I am friends with. So in a way, saying more or less, this is where I come from. This is how you can best understand the things I do and the way I talk to you. And this is how you should understand why I do this and why I do that. I think it's maybe a selfish exercise that try to be understood by people by giving those books. I don't know.
Do you have any specific failure, maybe a favorite one that set you up for later success?
Yes, I, how do I say this to you? Failure and success are very artificial concepts. And it could mean many things to many different people. Sometimes failing is a success on itself. That is, you fail when you attempt something and you don't get that something happening. That's a failure. Not trying is a mistake. So we tend to mix up mistake with failure. So failure occurs when you try. Say, I might try to run the 100 meters in 10 seconds and give it a shot and will run in 13, so I fail. That's a failure. But the fact that I given that a try is a success on itself because I was prepared to set an objective and went for it and give my honest best to achieve that objective. So in that sense, I'm I read this a while ago and it impacted me, and I try to tell as many people as I can this. When the trying to achieve something will not be rewarded by you achieving it, but will be rewarded by actually being honest when you try to achieve that. So in that sense, success is a side effect from trying honestly something. So I try to guide my life in that way. So I try, and when I try, I'm try to be honest with that try, and that's it. What happens after doesn't matter. It's kind of what one of your interviewees said. So it's not so much what you get; it's just the process that counts. And I try to go by that because, after all, you and me and all of us who might listen to this, we are just ourselves. We are not more than what we are. So the more we can do is to try honestly. And if we get that, or if we don't, who cares? I mean, I can try to jump 10 meters. Well, I'm a human. I will probably jump 1 meter and 20. But I should try honestly. I cannot punish myself from not being a cricket or something that jumps long.
Okay,
I'm just a human with all the failures and flaws that we all have. That's how I would answer that question.
great. Uh, if you could have a gigantic billboard that anybody in the world could see, which message would you put on in? A message for the whole world.
To be honest, the whole world is the collection of all of us. It's a notion that is built into us, but really is 7 million of individuals. Yeah. So keeping that in mind, what I would say, live your life, but don't stuff anybody else's life. I mean, it will be a great success if all of us could live our life without having hurt anybody in the way. So that's what I would try to tell people. Just focus on you. Don't stuff someone else up. If you want to win something, work for it, but don't make the other one fail. Don't put stones on their way. Don't cheat. Don't trick them. Don't make them fail. Don't hurt them. Don't whatever. And unfortunately, if we look at the reality, we tend to achieve things by sacrificing others. I mean, a war is won by killing others, and out of the war you get what you wanted. But you got what you wanted by killing others. So that's a horrendous thing to do. But we, in a way, I think we might be doing it in a smaller scale and hurting people along the way. And I think if we live just focusing on us, not out of being selfish, but just out of being us, the only thing we can control, then we focus on that, and that would be that. I think that will make the world a better place. I think.
What is the best investment that you've ever made?
Uh, that's a tough question because never invest. If anything, I would say the resources that I spend purchasing those books that I have given as gift to the people that I have received, I think they are the best investment I have done. Because I think if they read the books, I know they have. Uh, they are they're better off by having done so, and that's great.
Great. Giving that gifts.
Yes, I think
Great.
so. To be honest, yeah.
In the last 5 years, what new behavior, habit, or skill has most improved your life?
Okay, well, I will recommend to you when you have time to listen to Marco Aurelio de Negri.
Great.
He's a Peruvian intellectual. He's passed away, and I have spent time listening to him as I drive in my car, and I have learned so much out of him, and he has changed me a lot in the last period of my life. He has made me more humble, not because he's the inspirational type of talkers. He just is a simple intellectual that tells things as they are and makes you realize how insignificant we are as humans, but how wonderful we are because we can do what we do. So it humbles you to the point that you realize, well, there is no need to get angry because someone will do something just because that is who they are. It's nothing to do with you. And I don't know, I just learned a lot from him, and I believe that I'm a better person for that. It has impacted the way I relate to my students, in that I appreciate that there are beings that are wanting to get something, and I try to do my best to actually give that something to them. Or if I think of an athlete, again, it's an athlete that has a goal, and I do as much as I can for them to achieve that goal, even though I might think, oh, you will never be Olympic champion. Doesn't matter. You are trying, so I will help you as much as I can and sincerely, and with everything else. So I I stopped being angry. I stopped getting angry. I cannot remember the last time I got angry, to be honest. I tend to laugh more. I just see myself as a single person, and I don't know. I would suggest you listen to that guy, and hopefully you will agree with me after. He has lots of clips though, but it's quite entertaining to listen to anyway.
His name is Marco Aurelio what?
The Negri. I will send you by. I will
Yes,
send you
we
by.
can put it in the show
Yes.
notes. Great. What advice could you give to a 13-year-old starting to compete in Taekwondo?
Um, what I would say to anyone who wants to do Taekwondo is do it for the right reasons. That is, and the right reason is that you do it because you want it. There should not be other reason for you to try to achieve Olympic success. That you want to do it. That's enough. Why I say this? Because whether you achieve Olympic success or not, it is a personal thing that has no impact in anybody's life. I don't know whether I mentioned this conversation to you that I have with Carmen Martin, who was world champion in the World Championship in Mexico. After she's a outstanding athlete. Um, she tried for a long time, and out of nowhere, I would say, she did that. Out of nowhere, in the sense that um, she's not the super athlete that you will see doing the splits and doing 180 degrees kicks or anything like that. But she has this mental strength, this determination that I believe is because of that, and obviously the tactical ability she had to achieve that success. When after this was achieved, we had a conversation. In a way, I could notice in her demeanor that she was somehow troubled by the fact that after this, she didn't mention that, but that's what I actually could notice. After her having won the championship, she might be the target for any other athlete to prove themselves to try and beat her. So she's the person to beat. And I said to her, well, you are and you will always be the world champion of 2013, and that's not going to change. I don't know whether you will be the world champion in 2015 or 17 or later on, but the 2013 champion is yours, and no one is going to take that away from you. But then I asked her, have you gone to the shops? Yes. Did you buy whatever you buy? Yes. Did you queue to pay? Yes. And did anybody give you preference to pay the queue ahead of them? No. Okay. If you take a bus, you pay your fare. If you go to the movies, you pay your ticket. So nothing changes, and no one knows, and no one cares. It's not that it's not unimportant. It is very important for you and for your coach, maybe, but that's it. The rest of the world keeps going on with their own business, and nothing changes because of that. And there is nothing wrong with it. What I'm trying to tell you is this: a personal success that you have done for you. It's like singing in the shower. You do it for yourself, and that's the extent of it. So if a young athlete does not understand that, then it's probably doing a disservice to their career. I think we should understand that Olympic glory is yours and is for you, and no one else gets affected by that. The dollar price doesn't change. Yeah, the weather doesn't change. It's just the same. So do it for you. There will be people generous enough that will help you along the way. They might get some credit out of that. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you do this for you. So if it doesn't make you happy, don't do it. If it makes you do it because it makes you happy, it fulfills you. Don't do it because you have the talent and someone expects you to do that. Don't do it because you have done Taekwondo for 7 years. Now you have to do it. No, if you don't want to, don't do it. Just do it because you want it. And that's what I would say to them. Have it clear.
Great. What are bad recommendations you hear in Taekwondo competition nowadays? Something you don't agree with?
Yes, I don't agree with people trying to cut weight. I think in a way it's a bit of cheating. It's not honest. You are trying to look for the weaker player. Say if you weigh 70, if you want to drop to 58, it's because you think that the one of 58 is weaker than you, and therefore you have more chances to beat her and to beat him. I don't think that's right. If your weight is whatever it is, train harder, but fight on that, because that's who you are. You don't need to change yourself to be someone else in order to find what you think is easier. So this is, in a way, philosophically speaking, is looking for the easy way out. The paradox is that every other athlete is doing the same. So you will be fighting John, but if John doesn't diet, you will be fighting John in 70, but not in 58. So it's better off for you to fight John at his best, and you are your best, than you trying to fight John when he's weakened and when you are weakened. That I don't think is a silly thing. The other thing that I think in regards to that, and I will make a point to that, is because my dad once told me I was one of those who tried to cut weight because I'm a short person. I'm not tall at all. I'm stocky. I tend to be heavy. And I was trying to make weight. And I was 2 weeks eating for lunch cherry tomato, for dinner a raspberry, and for breakfast water, and doing that to make weight. And my dad said to me, and I remember that, son, I thought sports were about improving your health. That's the only thing he said. And then I realized that I wasn't doing that. I was going and working against me. And unfortunately, so many young kids do that. And that's tremendously dangerous for girls to do that, because girls have a more complex anatomy than males. They will be mothers if they choose to, and they cannot be playing up with droppings on weight or putting weights and taking that off, because that will affect their health in the long run, and also psychologically. I don't know whether it is the case in Mexico. It is, where I have seen when athletes stop competing, next time or next year you see them, they are obese. Um, Lots of my friends, they put on weight a lot. I had a Bolivian friend, 54 kilograms, really good athlete. I found him on Facebook. He's a very chubby, generous bodied man. So I don't think, yeah, I think it plays with our psychology too. So I would never encourage anyone below the age of 18 to drop weight. And that's a terrible thing that I've seen. And I would say that's a bad advice for an athlete, to focus on such an aspect.
It's a common topic when I'm asking this question. Everybody seems that is against it, but it's a practice that is prevailing.
Yes, unfortunately, it is because the notion of success. I want to win, but they don't win. Maybe some do, but it's not the majority. But it will be really hard to. I would take in. I would push into this conversation what I have heard Marcelo Bielsa said once, and he mentioned the serving and the getting. He started off by mentioning how in his childhood in his neighborhood, um, and I could relate to it because he was saying back home, uh, families will work together to try to purchase a car. And he tells the story of a family that mom worked, daughter worked, all their sons worked, and they put money together and they finally purchased a car, a Dodge, I think. It was a cheap car. And around the block, someone won the lottery and they bought a Mercedes, a very expensive car. Back in the neighborhood, as Marcelo Bielsa says, they all appreciated the effort done by the family who worked and purchased the car, and no one really valued the Mercedes that this other family who won the lotto. So what he was trying to articulate is that we unfortunately reward the getting, but we should be actually rewarding the deserving. What do you deserve to have? And that's something that I said to a group of athletes I'm working with. You should train so you are worthy, you deserve to achieve what you want to get. You should not train but expect something else. You actually, every action you do, everything, every little thing you do should make you worthy recipient of what you want to get. Whether you get it or not depends on a number of circumstances, but you have done your best to deserve to be the best athlete, or to deserve to be the best engineer, to deserve to be whatever it is. So we should promote more the ethics of deserving than the ethics of having, or as someone else said, is the ethics of being against the ethics of having. And I think that is fundamental to instill in younger people. So, and the lack of that ethics is what makes you see people trying to change weights just because they want to get the shortcut to a medal instead of deserving that medal. If that makes sense, hopefully it does.
Great. And as you said before, we lost the sense of the meaning of the sport, no? The
Yes,
going for health.
yes, I think that has been long gone, unfortunately.
Great. When you feel overwhelmed or or unfocused, what do you do to be on your way again?
Step back, look at who really I am, just as humble human being trying to do the best for their lives, and start again. So I don't take seriously the fact that I am such or such or such. I'm just a human like everybody else. I'm insignificant as everybody else is. So I just step back and try to do it again. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, well, I did try, and that's as much as I can do. I cannot do more than what I can. So I always try to remove myself from the situation and just look at me for who I am and just try to do that again.
Excellent. Well, Raul, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for the interview. I really enjoyed and learned from it. Last question: how can people can contact you? And if you want to add something, would be great.
Okay, yeah, I don't know whether there will be people interested in contacting me, but I'm happy to be contacted by anybody. My email address, I don't know whether it's best to recite that or give it to you.
We can put it on the show
Yeah,
notes.
or on the Facebook, I am there as Raul Landeo with my name. Yeah, if someone has a reason to contact me, just feel free to do it. I'm happy to get in touch with anybody. Yep.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Raul. I hope to see you soon.
Okay, thank you, uh, Luis.